Hello and welcome back to the Spotlight Games podcast. Today we're going to be talking about all those naughty leaks from Xbox last night. I mean, it's like we know everything. We have Phil Spencer's social security number. We're going to talk about it. We also are potentially, if time permits, going to be talking about last week's PlayStation State of Play and the Nintendo Direct. And for all of that, we're joined, as we always are, by my sweet dumpster boy, Cayman Darty. Cayman, how are you?
Oh, I'm doing all right, brother.
All right, brother. And back again, and for the first time with the dumpster boy, Mando, aka Chocolate de Mongoose. Mando, how we doing? Welcome back to the show.
I'm doing great. And all I want to say is Dumpster Boy's not always here because this is the first time he's here.
That's
when
true.
I'm here. I just want to say.
He's so much not always here. In fact, that his camera just kicked him out of the podcast.
Yeah.
Camera's doing camera things, guys.
Let's go.
Gotta love technology.
Hey, look, as long as we can hear you and feel you across the internet, that's all I need. That's all I need, Cayman. Cognitive Clips in the chat. Happy Tuesday, fellas. Happy Tuesday to you, Cognitive Clips. Thanks for being here. Always enjoy having you in the chat. We do have a lot of video game stuff to talk about because this is the Spotlight Games podcast where each week we spotlight the latest and the greatest in the world of video games. You can get it by subscribing to our YouTube channel at Spotlight Games Pod or by searching for Spotlight Games in your favorite podcast app. And hey, you can be on the show by tuning in as we record live Tuesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern time on twitch.tv/Spotlight Games Pod. So be sure to follow us there so that you're notified when we go live so you can be part of the conversation. And you can see Cayman just frantically trying to figure out how to get this to look good and feel good.
Let me turn on this light. Let me turn off that light.
Here's the thing. I think for some reason my camera keeps wanting to be picked up by GarageBand, and I'm like, it can't record. I'm not sure. There's no mic on this webcam. I don't know why GarageBand wants to do this at this exact moment in time instead of embarrass me, which
I'll
do that myself.
It's succeeding. No,
you're trying to get us into your garage, and frankly, I'll be there in 10. Also, in case you missed it, on October 3rd, only a few episodes from now, we're going to be starting a 5-episode series of the top 100 games of all time. Why am I telling you now a couple weeks in advance? Because in the description of this video or the description of this podcast, there is a link, a Google form that you can fill out to tell us your top 15 games to help us build the list. We have like over 25 entries right now, and there's like we've passed the 200 games mark in this top 100 games list. So things are getting left off now.
Some things are getting left.
A lot of big games are getting left off. So if you want to make sure your favorite game is in the list, if you want to make sure Bulletstorm is not number one, go click the link in our bio, in the description, in the YouTube comments, whatever. Give us your top 15 so that we can.
Who is this Bulletstorm fan?
The list. It came in biggest Bulletstorm fan. He's always preaching the gospel of Bulletstorm, a game that I famously will never play, only for the bit, because I want to be able to say that I've never played Bulletstorm.
Never played it. I will say, if I could chime in on it, please. I would love to see you guys also. I would love to see how the franchises rank, because I feel like the games is going to be interesting, but I wonder which franchise would rank the highest.
Sure.
Because I personally try to stay away from putting multiple games of the same franchise, because I can make a top 15 of 2 franchises if I tried.
Exactly. Yeah, for sure. I'm gonna, when we do it, we're gonna be kind of like slowly revealing stats to like what franchise was on the list the most in terms of just so there we'll have little bits of that, but that it won't just be like number 1 franchise, number 2 franchise, but I think we'll have an idea.
I like that. I like that too. I kind of just want to know those fun things. Like, cool, for sure. What got voted the most?
For sure. It's gonna be full of stats. 5 episodes of stats. Terry in the chat, how you doing, Terry? Also, Cognitive Clips submitted their list before finishing Sea of Stars, so now it's less accurate. Here's the thing, and I didn't want to necessarily reveal this because then you could just go break the list. There's nothing stopping you from just submitting more than one list.
No, don't.
This is an honor system thing, folks. So if I see Sea of Stars number 1 on 17 straight lists, Cognitive Clips, maybe I'll know that you fuck with me, but I'm just saying, if you want to fuck the list.
Wow, Cognitive Clips feels like that about Sea of Stars.
Maybe.
Though?
Yeah, give me an idea, like number wise, where do you think it would rank on your list? Because I mean, that knowing that it's top 15 already.
Yeah, that's huge.
Interested.
Yeah,
I'm interested.
Yeah.
We have so much to talk about today. This leak was massive. It's so much bigger than I think any of us anticipated. But we got to start our episode like we always start our episodes, which is talking about what we're playing. Mondo, you're the guest of the week. Start us off. What you been playing? I mean, I can assume.
Well, since we were just talking about it, I am playing a little bit of Sea of Stars. It's been my like bedtime game, so I figured out how to mirror my PC to my Steam Deck, and so I now play my PC games in bed or wherever the hell I want to at home.
Sure.
And so I've been playing Sea of Stars in bed. That's been like my quiet time, downtime game. Just New Game Plus Starfield, like I was just telling you guys before the show. So I got like 70 plus hours in Starfield, and
Nice.
unlike Cayman, I got another 70 in me.
Yeah. Are we talking game of the year potential for you, or give me your thoughts on
not
the
at all.
Not at all. Okay.
I think it's still. Don't get me wrong. I see the gripes people have with it. I feel like for me, I've left a lot of that in my early playthrough, and I've kind of like a lot of that has kind of like gone to the back of my mind, so to speak.
Sure.
But not game of the year though. I don't know, man. I still had to play Baldur's Gate to give my opinion on that, but
For sure.
Zelda is still my game of the year. Like,
Yeah.
What a freaking game!
What a game!
Jeez Louise. I still have stuff to do in that game, and I got like 100 plus hours in it already. So a little Starfield, and I started after a New Game Plus. I started Armored Core 6.
Ooh, what do you think about that so far?
Really good. It's really fun. Yeah. It's really fun. I really like mech games. Like I was a mech warrior kid.
Okay.
I grew up with a PC, so like I feel like that's kind of where I play those games the most. But so when I was like, oh, Armored Core from Software sounds interesting. And then once I saw the reviews, I was like, dang, gonna have to find some time for this. So
yeah,
started that, played through chapter 1, a lot of fun. Like it's
cool.
a game-ass game. Like that's what it is.
Yeah. Question for you. How big are you on very different game, Armored Core, to like your Dark Souls, your Bloodborns, your Demon Souls? Do you like those kinds of games from them? That's not your vibe?
I'm not really into Dark Souls. No. Okay. And it's not because it's so punishing. It's just, I don't know, something about them. I've never really been able to get into them. I obviously, like everybody else, probably just bought Elden Ring for the sake of buying it to see, oh, maybe Elden Ring's going to change it for me. Put in my 30 hours on Elden Ring. It was fun, but I don't know, something about those games that doesn't stick with me. But I see the influences though. Like I see where this game is also kind of like a Souls game. But I think it's enough of a mech game that I can look past all of that stuff. And again, it's a video game as game. Like it really is.
Do you feel like it's the difficulty? Cayman and I have been talking about this a couple weeks ago. We hadn't jumped in yet because we heard a lot about the difficulty being pretty steep. Have you gotten to a point yet where the difficulty is really noticeable?
Yeah, so my younger brother's beat the game a few times, so he's been waiting for me to start it. And I texted him yesterday, and I was like, "Hey, man, that first boss, he wasn't a joke." And he was like, "The tutorial boss?" And I was like, "Yeah, man." He had me like trying to figure things out. So that first boss was kind of difficult. The next boss was okay. It was all right.
Yeah.
I haven't run into anything where I'm like, "Damn, gotta change my mech out or like swap weapons, things of that nature." I haven't gotten to that point yet.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, it's been fun. It hasn't been brutal yet for me.
Yeah, I hear that. It's one that I want to play a little bit before the end of the year, but that it might be one of the ones that ends up being sacrificed for the rest of, because there's so many fucking games.
And that game, and it's good enough to maybe like, depending on what you're into, it could be a game of the year. Like, I don't know. It's really fun. Say it.
Yeah. John in the chat, Starfield is something, reskin Skyrim. I mean, I don't think they're trying to hide that.
I disagree.
Yeah, I actually disagree with that. Yeah,
I disagree. It's a reskin Fallout. That's probably more close. It's definitely like Skyrim is Skyrim.
Sure.
There's nothing like it outside of Oblivion and Morrowind.
So there are other fantasy games.
Fuck, I've been busted. I've been caught.
He's been busted. Cayman, what are you playing? I know you've been playing a lot of Starfield. We talked about it the last 2 weeks, but where are you at in your journey? Have you been playing anything else?
Yeah. So I locked in. I'm probably 45 hours now into Skyrim. Busted again. 45 hours into Starfield, and boys, I think I've tapped out.
Yeah. The stars are no longer speaking to you.
So I'm going to give you a scenario, and I'll prime this up to let you know why I think I've tapped out. So I ended up at a point where all of a sudden the game, it just collapsed in on itself.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, my body. It's art imitating life, or life imitating art, one of the two. So basically, I got to this point in a mission in which it stopped showing me where to go. I stopped getting mission markers. I stopped getting when you pull up your scanner, it stopped telling me where to go. And then so I'm like, okay, so I went through like the list of things to do.
Mm-hmm.
So like restarted the game, reloaded checkpoints. I restarted my entire console. And it came back, started working again. I was like, cool. Then the entire game the mission just didn't do anything. No one would
Which
interact.
mission is this? Can I ask?
This was in the Crimson Fleet, one of the big Crimson Fleet missions.
Got it.
I don't want to spoil too much about that quest line.
I really love that quest line.
It's such a cool quest line. And and I think this is what hurts even worse, is it's such a cool quest line. In this one mission in particular, you're infiltrating a base where they're like, don't kill anyone, because if you do, you're pretty much going to piss off every single person in faction. And on one hand, I think that's kind of shitty, because like the game's kind of built around free choice, and then you kind of realize there's really not free choice unless you just forsake having companions like you, and you kind of don't want to do that. So the problem is this mission isn't technically easy, and there's a lot of steps, and it takes about 45 minutes to complete the mission. And then when I got to the last part of the mission, it was like no one would talk to me. No NPCs would talk to me. Damn. So what I had to do was, and this is after refreshing, doing restarts, reloads, I had to reload in about an hour and 45 minutes, because that was the next closest save I had, and had to replay all of it. Ugh. And even replaying it was still not working very well. And I got to a point where I was like, I can overlook so much, but we're at a point now where like this level of jank, like it's not fun. And I put the controller down and was like, after I finished that mission, I was like, if I get another moment like this in this game, I will not pick this game back up. I don't.
And then you had another moment.
And then
you had another moment.
Damn. And I immediately, so I looked at it, I was like, I'm going to bed, because it's like 12:30. I'm like, I'm going to bed. I'm not looking at this anymore. And I was just honestly just disappointed. Because like there's so much, and this is what I think hurts more, is like there's so much fun to be had in this game. And so I don't want this to be like some like tell all of like this game sucks, don't play this game. I don't agree with that. For me, if this game continues down the road it is, and it did, I don't really know how much more fun I can have. And when the fact there's so many games still, like Armored Core, which my first PlayStation 2 game was the first Armored Core game. Wow. So like, I want to play
Zone of Enders, Big Max.
I want to play Baldur's Gate 3. I need to go back to Sea of Stars. There's so much, and Lies of P's on Game Pass now. Yeah. There's so many games I want to play, and I'm like, if I'm no longer having fun, I feel like I've played enough of this game to tell you exactly what this game is. Now, I say that, but I've also heard a lot of people say like, well, once you beat the game, you beat the main story, then it's like it's the weirdest little trick. And I'm like, I don't know if I can even get there unless I just forsake doing everything else and just focus. And then even then, the last main mission I did in Starfield, my scanner didn't work. And I'm texting Patrick being like, dude, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing wrong. None of this makes sense. And he's like explaining like, this is not happening. And then I had to reload my entire game, go back 30 minutes, play that. And then it started working. And I was like, like my frustration level with everything else.
I would be out too.
Yeah.
I'm like, I feel like I've seen enough. I've done enough to be able to be like, I can give like a definitive, like this is to me personally, this is a solid 7, whether or not I finish it or not. And now could that elevate by the way the game ends? Potentially can be bumped up to maybe a 7.5. But like, that's probably all it's going to get from me. It's disappointing. I don't think it's revolutionary in the slightest. I think there's things that work really well that I would love to see explored further. But I also still think that like Bethesda, like it almost feels like Bethesda's kind of hit that level of like, I don't really know if they can go past where we are now. Because we've seen it like this level of Bethesda. We've kind of seen this now for the last few games they've had, where it's like, I'm not sure what's next for Bethesda, but like for me to be drawn back in for Elder Scrolls 6, which we'll talk about later, I really need to know that like this is going to be a new type of game. And I don't know. that's where I'm like, so honestly, my excitement for a game that won't come out for 5 years has been diminished. And I'm like the biggest Skyrim fan. Like Skyrim is one of my favorite games of all time. So like it's a bit disappointing, but yeah, there might be a world in which I pick it back up. There might be a world in which I just move on to something like Lies of P or back to Sea of Stars or another one of our other billion games out right now.
Yeah, I got to
so much stuff to play.
I got to a main mission recently that bugged out on me and I couldn't make it, but it was an optional main mission. So I was like, okay, cool. I'll just skip that one. Also, is there a flute happening somewhere?
Sounds like an ice cream machine.
Oh, it's the ice cream machine by me.
No, you're good. I just was like, I hear something and I couldn't quite place it, but now I hear, hello, it's the ice cream man. I would love some ice cream personally. But yeah, no, I've not been having that same experience. I'm about to finish the main campaign. But yeah, if I was having missions not work like that for me, I would absolutely be out. It's just not fun at that point. Yeah, that does suck.
No, there's too many good games out to not be having fun playing games.
Exactly. Yeah, I've been playing a lot of Starfield, not a whole lot more to say, but I've also been playing F-Zero 99, which we're going to potentially talk about at the end of the show when we go through the Nintendo Direct. I know Cayman's a big F-Zero boy. Mondo, do you like F-Zero at all?
I did like F-Zero back in the NES days.
Back in the day.
Yeah.
I hadn't played a lot of F-Zero in my life, but I love the 99 mechanic. Like I really liked Tetris 99. I thought Super Mario Bros 99 or 35 was fun. This game not for me. Not fun for me. It is, I think, the only time excuse me, I've ever played a video game where I had more fun doing the tutorial than actually playing the game. When I was like going up against the computer and it would be like, all right, let's have a race where you're just playing 25 other people so you can learn these mechanics. Now we're going to play against 50 people. You're going to learn these other mechanics. Now let's do a real 99 person race to learn these final mechanics. And those, I was like, this is great. I can't wait to play. I played like 7 matches with real people, never did better than like 75. And I don't think it was because I was bad. I feel like it's just like completely luck based, like where you land in the spectrum. And it's just like, this just isn't fun. Like, I don't have to win every time I play. In fact, the point of this kind of a game is I'm only going to win a few times probably, but I have no idea how you could ever do better than what I was doing. Cause like, I feel like I was doing everything it told me to do. I was using the boosts. I was like trying to attack people with my little spin move, and it just like wasn't impacting the game at all. So I was like, oh, okay, well, maybe I just had a very niche experience with it, but not for me. And Cayman, you will not like this game.
Yeah. So I just want to say about the F-Zero 99 is like, in theory, I like the idea because I'm one of those people has said so many times on this podcast that like bring back F-Zero. I love F-Zero, but I want F-Zero like Wipeout. Like I want them to make a new F-Zero, not a gimmick based version. Yeah. And so when I saw the announcement, I was like, oh, fuck. And then all of a sudden it was like, oh.
When they said 99 and you were like, damn.
No, I don't want a battle royale Fortnite F-Zero. I just want to get in my car and future drive. Like what?
Yeah.
Ah, fuck.
Yeah. And like, I mean, it feels like OG F-Zero. It just is, it's a more frustrating version of it because you're going up against 98 other players. And because I mean, it doesn't feel like other battle royales, like a Fortnite or an Apex for obvious reasons.
Is it chaotic?
It's very chaotic. And so I don't remember, it's been so long since I played the original F-Zero. I don't remember if your boost was like also your health in F-Zero, the original, but if you use all of your boost, you get hit once and you're dead. So like you have to find this like balance between using your boost and not, because when you get hit by stuff, you lose a little bit of your health bar, which is also your boost bar. So it's like, it's this weird kind of balance of trying to use my boost, but also trying not to die, because if you die, you're out. You don't like restart toward the back of the line. You're done. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'm just so bad at the game that I'm not having fun with it, but I feel like it's a design issue. But again, it could just be that I suck at F-Zero, but it's free. So if you want to try it, go download it and give it a shot, as long as you have a Nintendo Online. Gentlemen, We got quite the story. Mando, you picked a great week to come on the show.
I know.
There is so much to talk about.
Good.
So I'm pulling most of this, if not all of this, from IGN. Taylor Lyles at IGN. She compiled basically kind of what went down and all of the different headlines of emails that were leaked. So we're just going to kind of burn through them and talk about them as we go. But this is kind of the general overview of what we're about to discuss. This week, several unredacted, highly confidential documents from Microsoft began appearing online. These documents were part of Microsoft's legal case against the U.S. regulator, the Federal Trade Commission. The case was argued back in June with a verdict reached in July, ruling in favor of Microsoft. The documents in question have revealed highly sensitive information regarding Microsoft's gaming arm Xbox, where its hardware roadmap is in the coming years, and other game developers it has had its eye on acquiring. And there's also like game releases, like all sorts of things in this in these leaks. To start with, though, one of the things, so since all of this went down, the FTC has made a statement that I think is worth mentioning at the top of all of this. They said, or there's no doubt that, actually skipping ahead, quote, the FTC was not responsible for uploading Microsoft's plans for its games and consoles to the court website, said Douglas Farrar, the director of the Office of Public Affairs at the FTC, in a post on X, formerly Twitter. Essentially, the FTC was like, Microsoft did this themselves. This was this was an accident. This shouldn't have been uploaded. But one of the first headlines, I think one of the quicker ones, but The Elder Scrolls 6 is an Xbox console exclusive. The Elder Scrolls 6, the next major installment in Bethesda's fantasy RPG series, entered the early stages of development late last month. But outside of that, and a teaser trailer revealed way back at E3 2018, when E3 was still a thing, news on this highly anticipated action RPG has been seldom. While Xbox boss Phil Spencer said a PlayStation version of The Elder Scrolls 6 was still up in the air during the trial, this new document recently spotted by Axios reporter Stephen Totilo reveals that The Elder Scrolls 6 is not only skipping PlayStation, but could release as early as 2026. That's bullshit. This game ain't coming in 2026. But are we? We're not surprised by this, right? Like we expected Elder Scrolls
2026. We might get to this later, but in the picture that had like the rollout of dates for the game coming out, it had Starfield releasing in 22, and then it had Elder Scrolls releasing at the end of fiscal year 2024.
Stupid.
What?
There's no way.
That's a Bethesda ass timeline, let me tell you.
Yeah, correct. But we're not shocked that Elder Scrolls is not coming to PlayStation. We kind of have expected this, right?
I think the caveat to that story, this particular one at least, is that I think that if there's any conversation we had here, it's specifically around the fact that they've been so cagey about it.
Sure.
And I think that's the weird part, right? Like, obviously, we all kind of knew in the back of our heads, like, the Elder Scrolls not gonna release on anything but Xbox or potentially PC, but mainly probably through just Game Pass PC, right? So then why be so vague about it early on? Like, what are you doing there? Like, why, like, in what world? Todd Howard's come out and said, like, yeah, when you think about Starfield, the whole thing here is that you should be thinking about Xbox. When you think of Starfield, you think Xbox. So with something so big, like, unless the entire portion of this was to try to, I don't know, convince the FTC there's a chance, but if the FTC had the article saying, like, no, this very much will not come out on anything other than Xbox and Game Pass, then, like, why are you telling consumers this, like, very vague fluff answer?
I don't know. We'll see.
No, like, you already know internally, you've already had this conversation before.
Yeah.
So, like, why? So unless it very much is one of those things where we're still going back to and falling back on this concept that, like, Xbox is gamer first, which categorically they're not. They are shareholder first. There's nothing else around that.
Sure.
So, like, that I think is the bigger story about this particular piece. Yes, we knew that, but why are you being so vague, cagey, and about this whole thing? Just fucking say it.
Yeah.
Cowards.
I kind of wondered if the reason that they were being cagey, I wonder if like there were potential talks of like PlayStation essentially like licensing Elder Scrolls for a massive amount of money, I'm sure. But I wonder if the reason that they didn't months ago just say like, oh yeah, no, it's not coming to PlayStation either, is if they're I wonder if there were talks about somehow, but it could just be that they didn't want that many negative headlines in a row, you know, quote unquote negative.
Yeah,
it's probably that.
For me, it was because I wonder how often the FTC has to deal with public perception having such a big influence on like their cases.
Sure.
Where like you got like the entire gaming industry like on Twitter like arguing with each other, looking up articles, oh but this and oh but that. Like I gotta imagine, because I was thinking about that, I was like, damn, when are we gonna get to an age where some people in the FTC did grow up playing games, you know?
Sure.
And so most of them, I gotta imagine that Elder Scrolls just sounds like another game to them, you know, especially because it's Elder Scrolls and it's not Skyrim. The Skyrim is the name, right? Sure. Elder Scrolls is just a franchise, you know, that has one pinnacle freaking game in it, and other good ones. But for me, it's like a public perception thing. You don't want it to then steamroll all the other conversations. It's like, what?
Right.
The sequel to literally one of the biggest games that has ever been released is going to be exclusive. Right. So I think because I also think that had the acquisition of Bethesda happened like a year later, Starfield's probably on PlayStation.
Yeah.
For sure.
Because like I gotta imagine Xbox bought them like just at the last moment they could have been like, yeah, you know that PlayStation, yeah, we're not doing that no more. But maybe a year later, they're probably like, hey man, you know, we already got deals here and set up for that, and the game maybe comes out for PS. So I don't know. That's kind of where
so I guess my question is part of me also wonders if that flips public perception on something like Call of Duty, where if like with them being so like nonchalant, or if they were to be like, whoa, like pump the brakes here. If you're saying that and you're about to buy out one of the, if not the largest franchise in video game history,
yeah. What then?
Are you are you gonna do the same thing for this too? But that's one of the weird things, you know, just living online, like I think most everyone does now. That hasn't been a conversation really anyone's had. I haven't really seen many people be like, wait, hold on, could they also be lying to us about that? Like no one has mentioned it, which I think is kind of interesting that no one has said anything, but at the same time, it's also like, well, for me personally, this losing something like Elder Scrolls 6 is a much larger loss to me than it would be losing something like Call of Duty, which I'd never play.
Yeah. Right.
So
that makes sense.
Could go either way.
For sure. Speaking of Call of Duty, Activision, apparently this is another headline. Activision was briefed on a Switch successor late last year. In recent weeks, multiple reports have surfaced that Nintendo is working on a successor to the Switch. And thanks to emails published yesterday, this discussion continues to get more fuel. The emails reveal that Nintendo briefed Activision on a next-gen console in December 2022. While heavily redacted, one email revealed preparations for a meeting between Nintendo President Shintaro Furukawa and several Activision executives, including certified piece of shit CEO Bobby Kotick. A note that Kotick also read aloud during the trial was visible in one of the emails, noting that the next-gen Nintendo console offers performance more aligned with the PS4 and the Xbox One. I feel like we kind of had heard about this one too already. Like this isn't as much like new news as like they got more of the email, I guess.
Yeah, I think when Bobby Kotick was talking, like speaking on the stand, he had like mentioned it, like he had like said something along the lines of like, yeah, you know, like the Switch is gonna like have the same power as like the PS4 and the Xbox One. People were like, what
right? Roll that back.
So I think this is more confirmation that like, oh, that happened in a meeting and there's like emails about it, more so than just Bobby talking out of his ass on the stand, so to speak.
Yeah. Do you think that this creates any sort of bad blood there, where it's like, you motherfuckers, that you were like, you roped us in to a fight that is not our fight. We're just over here hanging out making Mario and Zelda games, and you guys just roped a doped us, like, you son of a bitch. Like, I can only imagine Nintendo, right? Well, I mean, Nintendo will come back up here in a minute.
Yeah, that
like, how
they're more upset about than this.
Yeah, like Nintendo cannot walk away from today and be like, we feel great about our contacts now. Like there has to be some weird vibes.
Oh yeah, feeling about contacts, might be sketchy. I'm not sure about like the relationship between Xbox and Nintendo in general, because like I think about who was at fault with leaking this stuff, and like how far down the chain are they, like from like a Phil Spencer or like the executives that the execs at Nintendo are actually dealing with. And so it's kind of like for me, it's like a phone call or a meeting with like Nintendo, and Nintendo being like, yo, if we're gonna do anything, you need to clean shit up over there, because like,
correct,
what the hell, like how, like I'm not even mad about the email. Of course you'd want to buy us, but like, what the hell, man? Like, damn, not even a week after our direct and so on and so forth, like taking attention away from what they were just talking about. So it's like, it's just a bad look from that perspective. I'm not sure that it like hinders their relationship and like that they would make them less likely to do business. I think it would make them less likely to do business of like, hey, now we still want to do business, but like, I think we need to talk about processes of who touches what and who talks about what and so on and so forth.
For sure.
I guess
the person who fucked up, I gotta imagine that person's being let go today.
I guess from like my perspective, in regards to like so far what we know about the Switch 2 or whatever it's gonna be called, right? Is
Super Nintendo Switch. I hope.
I swear to God, if it's
Super Xbox Switch,
it's so fucking cool. But my thing is like coming from that, like all of the leaks so far have been very much like, yeah, it's in development. Yeah, there could be interchangeable batteries, things like that. It hasn't been as explicit
definitive
about the specs as what they're talking about now. So I guess where I kind of see this is like, look, if we're moving into a world in which Apple just announces the new iPhone and says we can do ray tracing for games like Resident Evil 4 remaster, and it looks like this. If you tell me they're aiming to try to get fidelity and processing power of the PlayStation 4, I don't know. I guess if I'm Nintendo, I'm mad because I'm like, if that's true, I want to put my Nintendo spin on announcing that, not putting a spin now being like, okay, you already know that it's not going to be nearly as powerful as what you guys got now. It's not even as powerful as the Steam Deck. Okay. Like, so like, I don't know, man, that's just a bad look. I think
that's a really good point.
The board.
Yeah.
It's a bad look. I think something though to keep in mind that like Nintendo has always marched at the beat of their own drum, and like that's someone, Jim Ryan could come out and be like, Nintendo Switch, piece of shit console, and they'd be like, hey, we're like the number 3 best-selling console of all time, so obviously you're wrong. So I think there's like, it's a little bit, but I'm sure there someone at Nintendo, whether it's Shintaro Furukawa or someone else, is probably like, this is a great dishonor to us, I'm sure. But
do you think that Phil Spencer, do you think that he commits seppuku after this?
No, I certainly do not. Maybe his bonus is a tiny bit smaller, but I don't know that there will be real impact on Phil. I think it's whoever is 9 rungs below Phil that did this. They're in trouble.
One random summer intern has to just
we started kind of mentioning a little bit about Nintendo. Let's just jump to that one and we can circle back to some of these other ones. So that one also, Kayla in the chat. Hey, Kayla, if you're still there, how you doing? This is one of the bigger ones of the league. Phil Spencer really wants Microsoft to buy Nintendo. During the trial, it was revealed that Microsoft had its eyes on 100 developers Microsoft considered acquiring at one point before narrowing it down to 8 studios, including Sega, Square Enix, and Zynga. However, there's another studio Xbox was eyeing, Nintendo. An email from August 2020, a really great time in the global history, August 2020, revealed that Spencer was enthusiastic about acquiring the studio behind beloved game franchises such as Mario and The Legend of Zelda. Spencer noted in the email that the acquisition, quote, would be a career moment, end quote, if it happened. The email also revealed that Spencer was interested in acquiring Valve and Warner Brothers Interactive, the latter of which would mean Xbox would own developers such as NetherRealm and Rocksteady. Mondo, you said earlier, like, who wouldn't want to buy Nintendo?
But
it's one of those things where like we've gone back, been talking about the Activision buyout for so long. Like we've talked, like who else do we think they'd acquire? And we've kind of tossed around, like, I mean, maybe
Take
Nintendo.
Two and Square, and,
right? And
you know,
Nintendo is like, I mean, anything is possible, but I don't think we were ever really that serious about a consideration of Nintendo. So for there to be email evidence that feels like, no, I want Mario to be Xbox, because he also goes on to say, it's not in this version of what I'm reading, but later in the email, he's basically speaking that like the Switch isn't, like, we can do better than the Switch, which again, to what I just said, like one of the best selling consoles of all time.
Well,
like
I think that's where hindsight comes into play. And like I did a little homework while I was at work today. So like I Googled to see how many Switches Nintendo had sold at that point when that email was sent. So by the end of 2020, they had sold about like 50 something million. Like that last quarter, like the holiday quarter, they sold that. It was like their highest selling quarter up to that point. It was like 10 point something million.
Okay.
So let's guesstimate that like the Switch in August is somewhere between like 30 and 40 million. And they're just coming off of the Wii U. Like I almost feel like in this whole conversation, people forgot that like the Wii U existed and Nintendo was not doing great. So like you're coming off the heels of a Wii U. It was just 3 years prior. The Switch is doing okay. The Switch is doing good, but I feel like it hadn't put out Animal Crossing, hadn't put out a lot of like its gangbuster games. I feel like at that point it was really like Mario Odyssey, Zelda, and Mario Kart carrying the torch for the Switch, and like a lot of third-party stuff. The reason I got a Switch was for Skyrim. I was like, wow, I'm gonna be able to play Skyrim on the go. Get the hell out of here! I'm buying this thing, which I feel like is a really high selling point of the Switch, of like having all the collections and all these remasters. Tomb Raider coming out. We'll probably talk about that later. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know if it's such a crazy idea to have at that point. I think he's still right though, right? Like they got a lot of cash on hand. They're not really in a position to be bought right now, even though they feel like, yeah, we could do better. I don't know. I just don't think it's too far-fetched an idea. I think it's easy to say that now, 120 million Switches later. I think maybe 3 years removed from a console that everybody objectively says wasn't good. A couple years into a new cycle that is doing pretty okay. I don't know.
You know, that's fair. I mean, we, at that point, so many people had bought a Switch because of COVID, but we didn't really have those numbers yet. Like we didn't know that like the historic rise of Switch.
Actually, I'm wrong. Animal Crossing came out that year.
Yeah, that was March.
Yeah, I'm wrong.
Year.
Yeah, that was my fault.
But still, I mean, it had only been what,
it had just come out in like April
into the cycle.
Yeah.
You're right. It's one of those things, like hindsight is at that, it was a different time in August 2020 in terms of what the business of Microsoft looked like and the business of Nintendo looked like. But I do find it interesting that would have been only 3 years after the Xbox. Or when did this new console start? Xbox Series
2020.
X
it was later that year, right? It's been 3 years.
Or not release. Was it 2020?
Yeah.
Okay, November 2020. So this was right before the Series X. So my point is, at this point, when he sent this email, we didn't even have the new consoles of Xbox yet. So we were at the end of the worst console cycle Xbox had. Yeah. So for him to think like, oh yeah, we could do better, is just, I find that kind of funny.
Okay, so I want to throw this out there. Okay, I got a couple points I think are important here.
Okay,
as of right now, in US dollars, Nintendo comes in at an estimated value of roughly 56.1 billion. Okay. Microsoft's estimated value is $2.5 trillion.
Oh yeah, that's like pocket change.
Okay,
the Microsoft Corporation.
Microsoft bought Activision for what?
70
almost billion. 70 bill.
Yeah.
So not saying like they're not going to be able to get Nintendo for less than 70 bill. Like
there's no way.
Probably closer to 100 bill is more likely that's what they pull. But I do want to point out something else, is that not everything has to be done cash in hand like the Activision deal. There are instances and situations that could occur in which they just do a hostile takeover by buying stock out at a ludicrous rate. They can do it to Sony too.
They could, although I will say they could, but in the email he did specifically say something
this
about
is very secession. This is very secession right now.
For sure.
Yeah, he did say that.
So with all of that being said, not that I think that we are going to end up seeing Nintendo get bought out, but it definitely sets an air and sets a precedent because there's other studios that were named in that. Studios that are like one in particular we've talked about multiple times that probably in the next year or two need to be bought out.
Yeah.
Something like Square Enix, Warner Brothers or Square Enix. Yeah. Square Enix for me personally is one where I'm like, and if your Xbox, the one you're going to want to buy out is the one that's going to tap into a market that you currently don't have any foothold in whatsoever. And that's going to be Square Enix. Yeah. So I think because this comes out, and then the question is like, was Sony privy to these documents as well to see some of this? Because now this might change the way that Sony's thinking of like, there's a world in which one of our biggest developers that we use that releases a lot of games first, like exclusive to us, is on the horizon of potentially being bought out as well.
Sure.
Does Sony start making moves? Now, here's the thing. Sony is not big enough in the slightest to be able to buy out something like Nintendo. Obviously, Microsoft could. But something like Sony, like it might be where it's like shit. Like this might be the drive for Sony to be like, we need to start buying people out before Xbox comes in and does it. And they can afford something like buying out Sega. They can afford something like buying out Square Enix. Like that is way more reasonable for them to buy out.
Right.
This is I don't
honestly,
like any of it.
For sure. For me, the one that's really surprising to me is Valve.
Valve.
So if you don't know,
Valve, could they afford
Valve? They own and created Steam, like the number one PC.
I'm gonna look up Valve's
selling platform, and the Steam Deck. Like, so that for me was like, I obviously this was 3 years ago, so like that didn't really go anywhere. Like we would have heard by now, but I wonder if they got the kind of idea of like, if we buy Valve, who
the largest gaming library in the world,
that
might be one step too close to a monopoly.
As of 2022, Valve's estimated net value is $7.7 billion.
No, stop.
That's
it is. I mean, don't get me wrong. It is just a store. Like they just started selling hardware a couple of years ago. Not with the Steam Deck, but
do you know how quick
the
Microsoft
that they made?
Like how quick Microsoft now enters into VR.
Oh, sure.
You skip if they were to buy all R&D. Yeah. You've already got 1 foot already in the door there, or not even 1 foot. You both feet are in the door. You already got it working
for sure. I think the FTC would shut that shit down so fast though, because they'd be operating 2 platforms in which you could sell games, and like that is when we start getting into like the real monopoly concern.
But
like
you say
controlling
that,
the narrative of
you say that though, but we just let Activision through, and that was like what would set the precedent for like how a lot of these are gonna go. They've pretty much shown that the FTC is gonna cave.
Sure, I feel you though, but I feel like Activision is like buying a brand that I can buy at the supermarket. And now I own
instead of buying the supermarket.
Buying Valve is buying the supermarket. That is buying the whole supermarket. And it's basically the only supermarket chain in this town that is PC that like matters in a great way.
Because Epic is trying to matter, but they don't matter quite yet still.
Not yet. They give me a lot of free games.
Hey,
a couple good ones. I'll take them.
A couple quick ones. Fallout 3 and Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion are getting remastered. That was something that there was a note back in 2021 about that. Also, this is kind of one of those things where we kind of expected something like this, but now we have like a general date range. Xbox is planning to release their next-gen console in 2028. A mid-generation console refresh of the Xbox Series X and S launching next year are not the only hardware ambitions. I skipped that. We're going to go back to that. As the tech giant is planning to launch a next-generation Xbox console in 2028. One document released mentions this new Xbox system will be a next-generation hybrid platform with development kits slated to launch in 2027. More interestingly, the document mentions a, quote, thin OS for a sub $99, which would be a consumer or handheld device, implying that Microsoft may release a handheld dedicated specifically to cloud games. That's interesting because they've been getting so, like with the ROG Ally, the Steam Deck, they're basically, this is how you can get your Game Pass on Steam Deck, even though it's not officially licensed. So like them releasing their own thing, I think makes a ton of sense. And I'm not shocked to see that would be happening. I'm shocked that it would take that long, all the way in 2028. But is this something that you guys saw coming, a handheld Xbox?
I actually thought that. I actually didn't think that we would.
Because I
feel like the market has opened up so much now, and like I feel like this is just the beginnings that we're seeing. Like this Steam Deck, Rogue Ally, Amino. I forget this other brand that sells really expensive handhelds.
Yeah.
But I think it's Anamino, something like that. I feel like this is kind of shaping what the landscape is looking like, and again, it's kind of like Phil has said time and time again. It's kind of why I didn't think it's like, yo, we don't care what you play on. Like the platform is Game Pass, right? Like the ecosystem is Game Pass. Right. So if you can access Game Pass on a Steam Deck, on a fridge, or on your Xbox, I feel like the way he's pitched it is he doesn't really care.
Right.
So I don't know. I actually am kind of surprised that they're looking at doing the handheld. I'm still waiting for the little TV box, the little connect to my TV. You be able to play games off the cloud from that. I mean, it'd be cool, I guess. I love handheld. So.
I think it doesn't. I don't know. Part of me feels like yes, this makes sense. Part of me feels like I don't know. There might not be something really here. I think that this might be more conjecture of like, hey, we might be doing this. Or we're going to put out a patent, and Sony does this all the time too, where Sony will patent random shit, and none of it makes sense.
Never do something.
Yeah, nothing ever happens with it. So I think for Xbox, to me, it makes sense for them to have something that they can say, hey, here's our Xbox branded peripherals that you can use.
Right.
That makes sense. So if they were to be like, hey, and like, we have Game Pass. You can play it on whatever the hell you want. Here's a specific controller. Here's a specific thing that you can use with it. That makes sense to me. Where it doesn't seem like it's necessary because they've already infiltrated certain areas with, different different handhelds. Like I think Asus has one in particular that like that's their thing is Game Pass on it. There's really no need for them to get into the hardware portion of it. But if they were to release like hey, you can like with the new TV that the Samsung, I think it's Samsung, right?
Samsung,
yep. Where it's like, hey, here's a specific controller that you can use that will connect to your TV, and you don't need to have a console or anything connected, just this controller, and you stream it, and it works perfectly, seamless. This seems like it makes sense. That does less than like them building an actual handheld.
Yeah, I would love to see a PlayStation Portable-esque product that can function on its own, though. That, like, I don't need an Xbox. I feel like that was Sony's miss with that product.
Sony needs that. That's the thing with Sony. Sony needs that. That's for them. That is something because the way that I think now you can get like PlayStation has a way that you can play games online.
On your PC and stuff.
On your PC, but apparently it's like a secondary game launcher and it doesn't work very well. And sure, that can get better with time, but like for PlayStation, I think the Portal is the foot in the door to what comes next, depending on how well that succeeds or like how well the technology itself works. I think if they say the technology works really well, all we have to do is XYZ, and it's going to cost a couple $100 more. Bingo, bango, bongo. There you go. You've got your PS Vita 2.
Yeah.
But right now, like Sony has to get in this market. They can't not be in it.
And they're years behind.
Yeah.
Like Xbox has been building that since like 17, and now when I open up that xCloud app on my phone, it's not as slow as it used to be. Like loading up. It's not as janky as it used to be. It opens up. I get to scroll. A lot of those games work on touchscreen, and then where it comes in, like, and I'm experiencing it with Sea of Stars right now. What a game that could benefit from touch controls but I need
Yeah.
a damn controller. And so this is where, like, if I had a little, to your point, if I had a dedicated device that was its own thing, I wouldn't have to worry about that. I wouldn't have to buy a backbone or nothing like that. I got to go buy another backbone if I want this iPhone 15. And that's like, you know.
Yeah. So speaking of that, so one of the other stories, they email from May 2022 showed basic concepts of a few devices, such as a one-handed controller, a mobile controller akin to the Backbone or the Razer Kishi, and as well as a new game controller currently in the works under the codename Sabile, which according to Xbox would feature direct-to-cloud connectivity. So I think that would be I would assume like a connect to your Samsung TV, connect to your, I guess, I don't really know how that would work, but so they're definitely
connect to itself. Just all you need is online. If all you need is online, and all it needs is a web browser, or not even like a fully functioning one, but just a web browser that can open it, and that's it. That's what I guess. That's not what bothers me so much about the PlayStation Portable, because I know the PlayStation doesn't have that ecosystem built, and so it's like once they build that, once they have an official PC launcher, I feel like that's when, to Cayman's point, we're gonna, like, this is the foot in the door, and we're gonna push the door open once that domino falls.
Couple quick ones, and then one big one I want to end with. Apparently, Red Dead Redemption 2 might get a next gen update. And then also mentioned it a second ago, Microsoft is planning to release an updated Series X and S model next year, which Phil Spencer had been on the record multiple times saying we don't need a mid-gen upgrade, but now they're saying it likely is happening, according to this leak, and that the Xbox Series X would match the S in that there wouldn't be a disk drive. So going fully digital for both consoles, which I think is interesting.
I do know what he meant, though, because I think what he meant was we're not making a more powerful Xbox Series X, which I agree. I don't think you need a more powerful one, because you aren't even getting the full power of this one, I think. It kind of makes it weird about hearing that with like the PS5 too. Like, I don't even think you're extracting the full power from this console, and you're already thinking about making a little upgrade.
Yeah, I think what we'll see in terms of like what potentially it looks like getting probably 75% of what this console can do is going to be Spider-Man at the end of October. I think that's going to be the first game that we see like, okay, what is this thing truly capable of? Even then, I still don't feel like we're going to be able to tap fully in. I mean, look at what like Naughty Dog did with The Last of Us Part 2. And like, that's at the very end of the PlayStation 4's life cycle. And you could fully see like, we have maxed this bad boy out. And this is what you get from a fully maxed console. So I think we're still early enough in where I think Spider-Man probably hits that 75% mark. So yeah, I'm in the same boat there where I'm like, because games have been delayed so much because of COVID and all the backs, getting pushed back and things like that. It feels like we are in a place now where it's like, hey, we're finally starting to catch up a little bit. I don't think we really need to see mid-generation upgrades until the earliest potentially being 2025. Even then, is it really even necessary unless you're just trying to push more hardware sales?
Which is I'm interested to see
lose money. So
I'm interested to see if this leak specifically is true, because they're saying it would be next year. The S upgrade would be coming in. Where did it go? In August of next year, and the X upgrade would be coming in October of next year. And upgrade in quotes, it's just like more storage and no disk drive and more RAM, I think.
How do you feel about the no disk drive?
I'm totally fine with it. I have the S, and I have the disk drive PlayStation 5, but I got it because I couldn't get the diskless PlayStation 5 when I was pre-ordering. And in hindsight, I'm glad I didn't. There have been times that I've needed the disk drive of the PS5, but I'm almost 95% digital at this point. I have very few physical games. It's something we've talked about on the show. Like, there probably will become a day where I regret that, looking at streaming services and all the shit that they're taking down. But I'm totally fine with a diskless console myself. What about you?
I don't care on the Xbox side, funny enough, because I've been digital on the Xbox side for a very long time. But PlayStation and Nintendo, I definitely still buy physical games if I can do it. I'm buying a physical. Yeah,
that makes sense. Last one, and this one, in my opinion, I think was the most interesting because it gave us answers about something we've not had answers for ever since Game Pass became a thing. This is an email chain showing Microsoft scrambling to fill, quote, a huge gap hole in its 2022 game lineup. In May 2022, an email chain between senior Xbox executives Spencer, Matt Booty, and Sarah Bond revealed how Microsoft was scrambling to find games as the company had a huge hole in its lineup last year. Look, huge gap hole, Booty, like these words next to each other. I'm 31 years old, but I'm having trouble not laughing, even though I should be an adult and not laugh about these words being next to each other. Games originally slated to release in 2022, including Starfield, Redfall, and Stalker 2, all being delayed, were mentioned in the email. Quote, this is really a disaster situation for us, given all we've invested in content across studios at our GP content fund. We need to learn from this and build a plan forward, Spencer said in the email chain before issuing a call to action from the team to ink third-party deals to circumvent the gap. This is where it gets interesting for me. The email also revealed the astonishing amount of money that Microsoft is spending securing these day-and-date deals. Microsoft estimated it would only cost $5 million to secure Baldur's Gate 3, which in hindsight is very funny. $35 million to snag Lego Star Wars, The Skywalker Saga. $50 million to get Dying Light 2. $100 million for Assassin's Creed Mirage. $250 million for Rocksteady's Suicide Squad, which still hasn't come out. And an eye-watering $300 million for Respawn's Star Wars Jedi Survivor. The email chain ends with Spencer suggesting Microsoft go after From Software's Dark Souls series for Game Pass, a move that would benefit from the huge launch of Elden Ring. So far, this is yet to pan out. So this is the first time that we've ever had numbers about like what are developers being paid for Xbox to be on Game Pass. Granted, this was all like, these are guesses that they kind of expect these games would cost to bring on Game Pass. But suddenly we have this idea of like a game the size of Star Wars Jedi Survivor, $300 million Microsoft would have to pay to be on day and date Game Pass. And back to your point, like the money that Microsoft is working with suddenly is like makes Sony seem fucking irrelevant in the amount of money they can spend.
And so we had a conversation about this earlier, and I think this is the big part for Microsoft right now. And this is coming from someone who works in a mega corporation, and I see mega corporation shit. And obviously they can't write this in an email because that's antitrust and there's a lot of legal ramifications for this to be written in an email. But they have roughly said this before. We can outspend Sony. Let's do it.
Right.
Microsoft has the money to outspend Sony. Here's the thing. If you continue to release games day and date, I genuinely don't know if Sony has the financials backing for the PlayStation side to be able to support launching their first party games day and date, much less spending $300 million to get access and the rights for Jedi Survivor. So all Microsoft has to do is rely on the massive amounts of money that they have in their wallet to essentially drive companies, specifically Sony, out of business by being like, hey, don't go get Sony hardware. There's no need for you to have it just so you can play 1 or 2 games a year because you'll get all of the games you want the same day for $20 a month. Then what happens is, and this is the downside to when moves like this take place, is you drive a competitor like Sony out of business because you can afford to. Then what they'll do is they'll go, we no longer will give you games day and date, and now it's going to cost you $100 a month, and you have no alternatives.
Sure.
And that's where we end up going. That's why when we started having these conversations about the FTC and all this stuff, I stood up and said, this is just from coming from a corporate background, this is not good because this is where this will end up leading. This is how you end up having situations where like a state like Texas has like one energy or electric provider. How is that fucking possible?
Yeah.
And so it's antithetical to the idea of free market capitalism when you monopolize by eradicating your competition due to your wallet size. So seeing something like, oh, well, we can just spend $300 million for a game That's how much Sony is spending on something like The Last of Us
to make the last right.
Yeah. So fuck that shit. We don't need to make anything. Why waste our resources making a goddamn thing when we can just buy our way to the top? And they've said that in an email. So, I mean, it's hard. Like, I struggle with taking a step back to be like, it's fine. Because, like, it's not fine. None of this is fine. Like, not that I don't want to see, because the truth is we run in, I've said this before, we run into the Marvel DC shit show. Where if DC cannot make good movies, there's no reason to Marvel to try to make better movies. And guess what? We're in the middle of that right now.
That Marvel is their current reality.
Dog shit because they don't need to be good anymore. And that's where we're heading if these trends continue and we let this happen. So is there a solution? I have absolutely nothing, and that's it. I'm done. I'm tapped out. I've exhausted any and all knowledge at that point. So feel free, someone else take the reins.
Sure. I'm shocked to hear like numbers put to titles.
Yeah.
Because like you think about Star Wars Jedi Survivor, one of the biggest games of the year. You think about Assassin's Creed Mirage, about to be one of the biggest games of the fall, or Suicide Squad was supposed to be one of the biggest games of last year. Now, who knows if it's even going to come next year, but like 250 million, 300 million, 100 million, like serious capital. And I can't help but wonder, now that Xbox owns Call of Duty and is now getting the majority of revenue from all of the revenue from Call of Duty, all of a sudden that's billions of more dollars that they can use to buy games like Jedi Survivor to be day and date on Game Pass. And it's just, this was the one for me of all of this. Like, this gives me like red flag heebie-jeebies of all of the leaks that came out. Manda, what are your thoughts on this one?
My thoughts are, y'all talk about monopolizing the console game. They have basically almost monopolized the mobile game. Like, with the acquisition of Activision, PlayStation might as well not even entertain getting into mobile gaming. Mm-hmm. I complained about Nintendo with their strong ass kids brand, like family friendly brands, not getting into like mobile gaming sooner. And then they finally made that like Mario Run game. And I was like, this is cool, but y'all need to start putting games on this, like actual games. And then what's that Pokemon MOBA?
Pokemon Go.
Pokemon Unite.
Pokemon Unite. When that came to mobile, I was like, okay, maybe this is like the first remnants of like actually taking mobile a little serious. It's interesting because it's like the two perspectives. It's like the one perspective, damn, that's a lot of money. And I don't know if Sony can spend that kind of money to keep up. The other thing is like everybody keeps saying that like Game Pass is bad for the developers. And I don't know. Those numbers sound really, really good. I wish I was a developer asking fucking Microsoft for 300 mil, which has to be most of the development cost for that game. Like, if not all of it and some marketing. Like,
I would think that is because during the trial, we found out that like Last of Us Part 2, Horizon Forbidden West, those were in like the 250 million range. Yeah. So if those are 250 and they were saying 300 for Jedi Survivor, I would be willing to bet a fair amount of money that is more than what that game cost by at least 50 million, if not $100 million.
Yeah, and these are his guesstimates, but I have to imagine that they're educated guesses based on what they paid from those exact publishers before on similar games, so on and so forth. And so I'm sure they're good numbers, you know?
Yeah.
Damn, man.
It's insane. There was I don't remember if it was that email or a
different. Some of those numbers were reasonable. I was like, okay. Grand Theft Auto 5.
Oh, yeah, 20 million for a start.
Red Dead 2. I was like, that's okay. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
5 million for Baldur's Gate? What a regret, man.
I know. Done it. I know.
Baldur's Gate's like, give me 500 mil now.
Yeah. If they could go back in time and change one thing, I bet. Because this part of the article I pulled didn't have it, but Star Wars, Spencer had like a bit of a shot at Baldur's Gate. Like, this game isn't gonna be worth it. Maybe 5 million for that. Yeah. Jokes on this, about to be game of the year probably. There was another, I don't remember if it was this email or a different email, saying that they expected pre-Game Pass, like pre-Starfield being on Game Pass, they expected it to make $900 million in revenue, nearly $1 billion for one game. So I'm curious if like what Game Pass changes in that, because now all of a sudden 3 people on this call didn't spend $60 on Starfield because it was on Game Pass. That's $180 right there that they didn't get. I'm sure that is millions of people. So yeah, I wonder if we're going to start getting more money numbers about Game Pass now that this leaked. If developers will be like, oh yeah, they paid us $42 million to have rights for us. Like Liza P, that was $60 million to have day one. Like I wonder if we're going to start hearing that, or not.
I wonder how they quantify that math, right? Like cool. Sure. Starfield could have made $1 billion. Is it because I can't imagine that it's as simply as like, oh, but we have this many subscribers this month. They're all paying $17. Multiply that. That's our monthly revenue this month, at least. But there's a whole bunch of games in the service. That's you got to calculate that. I wonder how they calculate that to figure out if something is going to be profitable. Because I'm imagining they're figuring a lot of people are going to join and they're going to stick around, right? Like they stick around for that 1 month and maybe 2 months. And then what's the next product that we give them to make sure they stay for 3, 4, 5?
And that's it's that subscription model that
I think that's the thing is here is like if you're looking at if they're saying like, okay, well, it's going to make if Starfield's going to make almost $1 billion, right? To me, I struggle with being like, yeah, that makes sense, because you would have to assume that like, is that number pre it being on Game Pass? Is that number like, what if we release it on Sony because Sony has way more consoles in the wild?
Yeah. I think it included Sony because it was pre-acquisition.
And we're gonna make, and obviously they're gonna make more money off of Sony having it on theirs because they're gonna get more pull from it.
Yeah.
So like, that is a bit of a curious point. And I sit here and think like, okay, well, what about the people who are like me who at the end of this, say if they're getting to Starfield and they're like, okay, I've put in 30 or 40 hours in, and honestly, this game is not clicking for me anymore. I don't have that extra capital to be spending right now going into the holidays, these things. There's really nothing on the horizon in Game Pass that I want. There's really nothing there, which to a conversation we Patrick and I had off air was like, I looked at both Game Pass and PlayStation Extra to be like, okay, well, where's the because I'm like, okay, if I'm not going to play this game and I'm trying to find something to do, and if I don't go back to Sea Stars, what am I going to play? Mm-hmm. So I'm going to look there to see if there's something. I'm already paying for this service anyway. Is there something I want to? Outside of Liza P, there's really nothing else there on Game Pass that I'm actually interested in. Whereas I look at PlayStation Extra and I'm like, there's a lot of games that were released 6 months ago that I didn't touch because it's been such a busy year. This actually is a better service right now, but I don't get games day one. So the thing for me is like, okay, well, how many of these people play the game, get 30, 40 hours in, go, okay, this isn't for me, cancel.
Yep.
And then now you're drawing away from it. So Game Pass with Starfield in particular is relying so heavily on the fact that like, if this game's not really fucking good and we didn't drive people to stick with this, then we're losing money hand over fist. And so I do know that they did announce that there was like a big uptick in console sales for Xbox for people getting it for getting a console so they could play Starfield. So they are making money.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's interesting. But at a certain point, like if you can start driving your competitors underground by outspending them, like it doesn't really matter how much you make if this is the only place you're going to play them now.
Eventually.
Yeah, you're making you're essentially winning the battle before it's even begun. The battle's not going to be for 5 years. You've already put the nail in the coffin. That far ahead, you just got to suffer through, weather the storm for a few years, and then you're gold.
There's even more to unpack, but that's kind of all there is for now. But I'm sure by this time next week there will be even more shit that's been figured out.
Oh, and you know, PlayStation and Nintendo had shows last week. In case you
which so I do want to 2 quick things. Really big moment in the chat. We got a bot offering us a promotion for our channel, our viewers, and our followers. So definitely don't follow that. But I did want to say, so we had planned on going through the state of play and the direct, but we don't have time to go through all of those because we're already over an hour. But I wanted to ask you guys, putting you on the spot, and I can start first if you guys need a second. What's one thing from each of them that stood out to you? Mando bringing up his Sephiroth.
You already know. Freaking Sephiroth, baby. That's it. February 29th. Already putting in my time off at work. I don't want to hear that. I told my wife, don't look for me. I was like, hey, I'm taking time off at the end of February, just so you know. It's not gonna cut into like our time or anything like that. Like time off I need to take for us, but don't come looking for me. Don't come looking for me, man. I'm excited. Good God.
That trailer looked really good.
Really good. Really good.
Yeah. Anything from the Nintendo side that jumped out to you?
It was cool to see like another trailer of Mario RPG. I think it's cool what they're doing, like bringing back some of these old games and Peach getting another game. But the thing that actually excited me the most, oddly enough, was that Tomb Raider, like triple pack, like like
1, 2, and 3
coming out. I was like, what? I used to love those games, man. Those were one of my first PlayStation games. Me in that cave with the tiger in the beginning of the first Tomb Raider. That's like but I'm really looking forward to that actually coming back out.
Cool. What about you, Cayman?
I think so. From Nintendo, I think the big thing for me was the release window or release date for Peach, the Peach game, being in, I think it was March.
Showtime.
Yeah, was it March of 2024?
March 22nd.
That threw me because I was like, when the hell is the Switch 2 coming out? Because I kind of expected it was going to launch in March. So I was like, oh, okay, well, this is weird because why would you release a game for the Switch? Wouldn't you just push off for the Switch 2? Or is this going to be like one of those Breath of the Wild where you're going to release it like a month before and then release it again for the next? So I'm like, I've got my head's a spinning in a whirl right now.
It's going to be back compat.
Ooh,
it's
that too.
Most likely back compat.
So that was the one for me that I was like, okay, that's interesting. I'm interested to see how this all pans out from there. Now for the Sony one, while I think we all went into that with kind of low expectations because they kind of basically said like, hey, we're going to talk about games we've already announced and some indie titles. I think two things for me. One, the separate ways, them like almost not shadow dropping, it would be like, it's live next week. Was like, whoa, okay, didn't expect to see that pop up.
Which is Resident Evil 4 DLC.
Yeah, sorry. Should have said that. It's almost like I'm not a fucking professional. So like that was, I was like, whoa, that's really cool because I was curious. I was like, okay, are we actually going to get separate ways, or is that like a pipe dream, like something? But we are, and it looks really good. But the biggest thing for me, boys, Spider-Man 2 has seamless swapping between Peter and Miles. And that was literally, I looked at when they said it. When they said it, I looked at Sid, my wife, she's sitting next to me on the couch while I'm watching it, and I looked at her, I said, this is the only thing I wanted from this game, was to be able to Grand Theft Auto 5 this shit and just swap seamlessly between the two of them at any given point. And to get that, my hype level for this game is through the fucking roof.
I need to hype you up more. Did you hear some recent interviews that have been coming out? And they were talking about how you could be roaming around the city as Peter, and Miles could be doing something, and you could just see it and be like, oh damn, I gotta go help boy out. Oh, stop, man. They are getting I was really hoping they would take it to that next level because I felt like they were to that point. I felt like they were trying things out with Ratchet and Clank and the two character thing. I was like, nah, I gotta take it to the next step with Spider-Man though. Yeah,
that's hype level.
It looks so good. I texted Cayman. I was like, that is the perfect amount of Spider-Man we need to see. Do not show me a single thing until October 20th. That's it. No more. That's it. Because it looks so fucking good. Spider-Man 2 would have been my choice, but since you chose that, Cayman, I'm gonna say baby steps out next summer.
Yeah.
Bennett Foddy's next game. I know it looks so stupid. I just didn't.
Oh my! What are
you that's what I love about it, though. It's just like, what? This is weird.
If you didn't see the trailer for Baby Steps, just go watch the trailer for Baby Steps. It's one of the weirdest trailers I've ever seen in my life.
My favorite was when he falls down the hill and you just hear him as he's falling go, oh fuck, oh fuck, oh fuck. I'm like, this game's gonna be funny as hell. This is gonna be. I'm gonna throw my body down cliffs just to hear this guy in his broken Scottish just
for sure.
Screaming profanities.
It reminds me of like old PlayStation 1 weird.
Yes.
Where the PlayStation 1 just had weird stuff on it.
Mr. Mosquito. Yeah.
I mean, really, even though it's pretty mainstream, like Ape Escape was a fucking weird game. Like just going around trying to catch apes with a net is fucking weird. And then on the Switch side, I am so pumped for Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door HD coming next year because I've never played it. I've never played any Paper Mario game, and so many people have told me that this is the best of them.
100%.
So I'm excited that I'll finally get to play that. I don't think we got a date, just that it's coming in 2024. So that has skyrocketed to the top of my 2024 hype, because 2024 already shaping up to be a dope year. So yeah, let us know what you thought of State of Play and Direct. We didn't deep dive, but those were the highlights, and then let us know, what are you thinking about all this Xbox business? Are you scared? Are you excited? Are you Phil Spencer? Do you want to comment on live on air next week? Let us know. Mail at spotlightgames.net. Also, one thing with the calendar to update, Game Pass, they didn't give us dates, but Gotham Knights coming to Game Pass, as well as Payday 3 and a game called Cocoon are going to be coming to Game Pass. So Gotham Knights, I never actually bought it on PlayStation, so now I might play 30 minutes of it on Game Pass.
Isn't
my
Payday
guy
3?
45 here?
Let's go.
Isn't Payday 3 day and date as well on Game Pass?
It is.
Mm-hmm.
It is. So actually, we do know the date of that, but I don't know.
And I'm assuming they probably spent at least 10 million on this.
Sure, maybe 3,
maybe 6,
100. No,
they Payday wishes they could get that. That'd be a payday for them.
Yeah.
Mondo, as always, such a pleasure to have you. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Where can the folks find you and all of your hijinks that you get into online?
Chunklet the Mangu on everything, across all socials. You want to add me on Xbox, PlayStation, Nintendo? Actually, Nintendo's just Chunkleta, because they won't let me make it longer than that. But
the Mangu erasure from Nintendo, I don't like that.
It's a struggle I have when they're like, 11 character limit.
Yeah.
Sorry, buddy, you're gonna have to go without that U.
Yeah, I get that. Cayman, how about you?
You can find me on Twitter. I don't call it X because that's lame. At the Dumpster Boy, and we kind of have a somewhat Patrick. I'm going to throw this in there because I can. Curveball. We got some upcoming news about Save Trash Cinema. Guess what? It is indeed coming back, and it's coming back sooner than you can imagine, because we have some exciting shit that we are part of for the relaunch of Save Trash Cinema. So be on the lookout. In October, we're coming back, baby, and we're coming back stronger than ever. So you can find that at
Horror
Save
movies?
Trash Cinema at
October?
October. Coming back for Halloween, baby, for Save Trash Cinema. You can find that on all socials at Save Trash Cinema. So be on the lookout on socials for when we will be announcing when that date comes back. I got a hint for you. It's the first week of October. So
let's go. It's happening. It's happening. All sorts of fun things happening, just like the top 100 games also starting the first week of October. If you didn't hear to the beginning of the show, go to the description of the podcast or the comments section, whatever it's called, in YouTube. Click the link. Give us your top 15 so we can hashtag build the list. Top 100 starting October 3rd, episode 96. We might be seeing our boy Chunklet the Mangu on one of those episodes. So
I'm so glad you guys did it, because and this is just if you're listening to this and you need a reason to do it other than submitting your game to make sure that it's in its rightful slot in the top 100, I have never sat down and questioned my gaming life as much as I was sitting down to try to get those 15 games. What are the 15 games? I had to take out some games. I put in some more games. I was like, damn, I had this game at 6, but now that I remember this game, that game is actually 5. And so it's rearranging the order. I left a lot of gems off. I think I'm going to have to resubmit a few times.
Sure. It's crazy. It's funny when you're because I get to see all the responses and I'll see like number 15, Skyrim. And I'm like, or number 14, Hades. I'm like,
how?
Right, but there are just so many fucking good games.
So many games.
So,
Hades, what? I'll tell you, that wasn't on my list, I think.
Yeah. Hey, that was one. Another, we gave a peek behind the curtain last week, a peek behind the curtain this week. It took like 9 submissions for Hades to even show up. And the first time it showed up, I was like, oh my God, Hades. How did this game not show up until now?
I actually think, you know how people say recency bias? I actually think when you're talking about GOATs, when you're talking about the greatest of all time, recency bias is actually a negative thing. I actually think the more recent a game is, the less likely it is to end up on a top 10 or top 100 games list. Damn, I didn't even think about Hades. I mean, I love that game.
You say that, but you might be surprised.
I didn't love it enough. I didn't love it
at some of the games. at some of the games already in the top. There might even be some from this year already in the top, and we're gonna have to wait and
Well,
find.
I know
Only
one that warrants being on the top this year. From this year,
for sure.
I'll
might
give
be
it
more
away.
than one.
It's from my list. I put a game from this year on the list.
I did too.
Dead Island 2.
Dead Island 2. Let's go. Let's go. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. We'll be back next week, Tuesday, 8 p.m. Eastern time on Twitch. Follow us, all those things. Have a good time. We love you.